is the race committee, and this race is live.
How's the pressure look on this right side upwind?
Okay, he's tacked back. Left side looks pretty good still.
What do you think if we do 2 tacks?
I think so.
So in that case, we need to keep it fast.
It's a bit more stressful than it needed to be, eh?
It's time for another North Sails podcast from the 37th America's Cup here in Barcelona. I'm your host, Ken Reed, president of North Sails and North Technology Group. And this time we're going to speak with some of the legends of the microphone. That's to say, some of the characters who have brought the cup to life, not only on television, but on radio. Well, today I'm joined by some illustrious voices of our sport who were there when the big moments happened. Gary Jobson, Jed Drake, and Peter Montgomery. So let's dive into the people who have not only watched a ton of races throughout their careers, but who understand the nuance and emotion in the heartbeat of sailboat racing. Gary Jobson was one of my sailing heroes when I grew up. A mythical college sailor winning All-American status all 4 years he was at school. And College Sailor of the Year twice, by the way. He was a bit of a driver for a lot of us who wanted to succeed in sailing. When I got out of university, started elevating in the sailing scene, I got a call from Gary in his office in Annapolis, Maryland. I happened to be in town for regatta and he just wanted to chat, tell me about his life in sailing and his career to date. Around the time of our meeting, he was just getting into broadcasting. I think he just wanted to say to a young kid that there was life in the sailing world, to give me a little nudge, to say that I might have what it takes if I worked hard enough at it. I will never forget that meeting. So fast forward to today, Gary's been a pioneer in the sailing world, period. And I had the opportunity to sit with him and discuss the past, the present, and the future of the sport that he clearly loves.
So I'd been College Sailor of the Year twice at New York Maritime College back in 1972 and 73. And I met Ted Turner at a regatta in Barrington, Rhode Island called the Interclass Solo Championship.
I did.
And Robbie Doyle beat me by exactly 1 point. And Ted Turner was 6th. And at the end of the regatta, he came up and said, "Boys, I don't know who the heck you are, but we got to get to sail together someday." And that's where I met Ted. And a few years later, I started racing with him on Tenacious, and that led to the Congressional Cup and the America's Cup. So I owe it all to Ted, and my dinghy sailing certainly helped out get his attention.
So how did that turn into television? And because you just don't wake up one day and say, "Hey, I want to be a commentator." How did you get pulled into this?
Well, as you well know, Ken, being a commentator sounds good on paper, but it's actually hard work, and it's not so easy to do. So I was the editor of my high school newspaper and my college newspaper, and I did a lot of writing. Then during the 1983 America's Cup, it looked like the United States was going to lose. And I was on a boat with Tom Blackhauler. We lost to Dennis Conner in the trials. But because I was around the waterfront and could say things concisely and try to make it understandable for people that weren't sailing, I got invited to be on Good Morning America early every morning and on Nightline with Ted Koppel every night. And in between, I did the Australian Broadcasting Network radio broadcast live from the America's Cup. So that was pretty exciting. And interestingly, ESPN did the last race of that cup in 1983, race number 7, and they got a huge rating. And the young executive named Steve Warnstein said, "Oh, we got to do this in Australia. And if an American wins, it'll be a huge thing." And they were looking around for somebody to commentate. And, hey, how about that guy that was doing Nightline in Good Morning America? I got to try out. Jed Drake was there, who I think you're going to talk to. And anyway, I got the job. But I will tell you in the beginning, I was A, nervous, and B, not very good at it. But luckily, I had really good people to work with, like Jed Drake and Jamie Reynolds and Jeffrey Mason, that really helped and coached me. And then my writing experience and public speaking that I've been doing a lot of all came together. And I ended up doing 9 America's Cups. And most recently, I did the Olympics from Marseille, which was my 7th Olympic Games.
What was more fun, winning a cup as a tactician or having this crazy career in TV? Because, I could make a case for both. Which would you think?
Well, they're both exciting. And as you know, Ken, it takes a lot of teamwork, and there's a lot of people that you don't necessarily see that are behind the scenes, and it's a lot of working together. I mean, to have won the America's Cup on my resume a long time ago, 47 years ago, is something I'll never forget. Of all the America's Cups, the one in Fremantle, when Dennis Conner came back and won the cup after losing in Newport, that was pretty special because we had gigantic ratings, and it was new, and it was at midnight in the U.S. and summertime in Australia, and it was a very exciting thing. I'll also say that San Francisco in 2013, when I was with you and Todd Harris, my goodness, having the USA down 8-1 and coming back and winning it, I remember you and I talking, we could hardly believe that you could come back from that down.
Well, you just set me up perfectly. That's why you're a pro, Gary. You just set me up perfectly for this next question. Let's go 1987 to Fremantle, because this is, for my generation, that was TV. That was TV for the first time for sailing for all of us. We were up at like 2 a.m. watching you and Jim Kelly bashing around out off Fremantle and big breeze and crazy waves and telling the world what the heck was going on. That was unbelievable, really, wasn't it?
It was extraordinary, and a lot of good curves crossed all simultaneously. Big wind off Fremantle, blowing 25 knots every afternoon was good. Patriotism, Dennis Conner cleverly calling his boat Stars and Stripes. How can you go wrong with that? And it was a comeback. He was not in good shape and vilified losing that cup in 1983, even though he almost pulled it off, but he didn't win. And then for ESPN to get those onboard cameras and microphones so we could hear Tom Whidden and Dennis Conner and talking back and forth, and Peter Eisler back in the cockpit. It was exciting and thrilling. It's very rare to get in the competition, in the huddle, or out on the mound to hear what they're talking about. And so it all came together, and it was very exciting, and people cared. I think race 4, when they finally won it, there were 3.8 million people watching that television show. And as you point out, the race was at 12:10 a.m. in the morning on the East Coast. That's so bad on the West Coast. It was 9:10 in the morning, but it was late night stuff.
What was Jim Kelly like? Because I can hear, when I shut my eyes, I can hear Jim Kelly's voice. He just had a voice made for it, didn't he? But what was Jim Kelly, your partner back in Fremantle? What was he like as a human being?
Jim cared about people. He cared about sports. He was kind of a sportscaster in Philadelphia, and he got himself to ESPN. He had a wonderful voice, and he knew 0.0 about anything of the sport of sailing. And Tom Blackwell used to chide him all the time about that. But Kelly knew how to ask the every man in the streets question. Gary, why is one boat faster than another? Well, good. I can tell you why. Hopefully you're on the faster boat. So he had a great voice. He worked hard, and he did a great stuff for us. And he and I clicked on the air. And Jim Kelly's the kind of guy you want to go have a beer with, and he knows a lot about sports. His nickname for that Philadelphia station was Jim Sports Kelly. So he was good. I went back and watched a lot of the America's Cup races. I got him on a hard drive from ESPN and NBC, by the way. And I'd forgotten how good Jim Kelly was as a host. And Peter Eisler, too. He was good. He is more of a technical guy than me and Jim, for sure. But he was interesting to listen to. So those were good days doing the coverage in Fremantle and later in San Diego.
I agree. It was a really good team, and you kind of need that. You kind of need that the 3 different kind of looks at the race course, don't you? I mean, we've been doing, ever since I did it with you in San Francisco, we've had kind of 3 different looks: the technical side, kind of the storytelling side, and then the run the show side. I guess Jim ran the show, and you told a lot of stories, and Peter chimed in a little bit of technical stuff.
Right. And Todd Harris, who you and I did the cup with in 2013, I thought he was excellent. He's got this nice element of enthusiasm, I don't think Todd knew any more about sailing than Jim Kelly did.
If it's
But he's good. He was good to work with. And he set you up nicely, and he set me up nicely. So,
So do you think a Fremantle America's Cup could happen again? That kind of big breeze, big waves. It feels like it's kind of been toned down to places that, if it blows real hard, I guess you could make the boats for it. I don't know. It just seems like a Fremantle Cup. It would be hard to ever replicate that.
well, Fremantle turned out to be great for 12 meters. They had a 30 knot. Think about that, Ken. 30 knot upper wind limit. So they raced just about every day. And the wind was, 23 to 28 knots almost every day out there as the afternoon sea breeze came in. And it made it really exciting. The races off Barcelona, they're okay, but when these boats come off the foils, it's a tough thing to watch. And, sailboats like wind, and we probably should have a venue that has more wind. Personally, I like Newport, Rhode Island. So
That's an easy one for us to talk about. That's for sure. So okay, another good setup, Gary. Well done again. On to today, the flying boats, the America's Cup, the race course. Just give us a quick rundown. What's today's America's Cup like for Gary Jobson?
Well, it's certainly a lot different than racing heavy 12 meters off Newport, Rhode Island. I mean, look, these boats are fast. They're interesting. There are tactics involved. The wind shadow extends a long way and is very effective when you can force the other boat to sail through the exhaust of the wind on different legs. And it's an athletic competition, and it's certainly emotional. The problem is it's hard to connect with these boats because most people don't sail foiling boats, and we get to see the sailors with goggles on and helmets, and so you don't get kind of the personality of a Connor and Whidden and the banter that went back and forth. But it's the America's Cup, and I bet you Nathaniel Green Harrisoff and John Cox Stevens and the people of past, I bet they would embrace these fast boats because in their view, the America's Cup was all about coming up with a faster craft that was using technology to go faster. And that's what these boats are all about, which begs one big question, Ken. Where are we going to be in 50 years? I mean, you and I are going to be old in 50 years, but what could possibly be next?
Well, okay. Again, another nice setup, Gary. You're still a pro, man. This is very impressive. So if we got a bunch of young kids out here, we got this the women's America's Cup, we got the youth America's Cup, and of course, even the players in the cup itself are I think age-wise quite young compared to when you and I did this. What does that say about youth sailing these days? So let's take another step further. How are we gonna? What should kids be sailing when they're young? Is the Opti dead? I mean, how are we gonna train kids? They all want to go flying now. How are we gonna train kids a little bit better than we do today?
Well, certainly the Optimist dinghy is not dead at the present time. And I think it's a really good boat for young kids. And when I say young, 7 years old to 10 or 11 years old. But I think when a kid gets to be 11 or 12, you got some athleticism going there. You got some size and you got some competitiveness. And, maybe yacht club should try them out and have a few foiling craft, these nifty wasps. Maybe there's a smaller version of it. And, I look sideways at the Olympics at kiteboards and the windsurfers, but after covering it, I thought they were pretty exciting. I mean, the kites are going 45 knots and the windsurfers are going 35, 38 knots. I mean, it was pretty interesting stuff. There were lead changes and it's a different sport, but to get young people engaged, maybe speed is the answer.
You think we ever see in our lifetime flying boats in college sailing?
Boy, did you notice that long pause?
Yes, I did. I didn't want to say anything.
Well, Ken, I think it's fair to say that you and I and your brother too, we all did well in college sailing, and it did well for us too. I know I'm a better sailor because of my collegiate career, and I'm sure you feel the same way too.
Absolutely, yep.
But at college sailing, on the one hand, you're really good at boat handling, you're good at starts, you know the rules, but there's no long course racing. There's no boat tuning. You don't learn about speed, which is so important. And I never felt I really got good at that kind of stuff. I was always good at tactically and was good at boat handling, but I never aced the speed element of it, which you have mastered. And college sailing needs to improve itself. So I would swap out little boats like 420s and flying juniors, and I would emphasize Olympic classes. Why not 470s or even 49ers or faster boats? You might have less races in a day, but at least our sailors were prepared for the kind of racing that they're going to do after college.
Is that the magic wand to grow sailing here a little bit, or is that just a small cog in a bigger issue?
Well, when the America's Cup and the Olympic Games have foiling, 5 of the 10 classes, as you know, were foiling boats, and they were interesting to watch, and people liked it. We should be preparing our young people to be able to do that. I mean, at the age of 74, I don't think I'm going to be doing kite foiling in the near future.
Come on, Gary. Don't be defeatist on us. Let's go.
Okay. I'm probably more comfortable in a laser, but you need this variety for people to do it. And I think our junior sailing and youth sailing should take a hard look at what we're doing and try to get people prepared for the future, because the foiling's it's cool to watch, but how to do it, it's a whole new skill set. And that's why these cup sailors and these Olympic sailors are so interesting, because they're starting from scratch. I mean, this has only been around a decade, and it's only been the last, let's say, 5 years that people have become fairly skilled at it. But I'm sure the next generation that's really good with computers and has been doing this since they were about 8 years old, they're going to be a lot better than the generation of today.
Like you said, what are these boats going to look like even another couple of years, never mind 5 or 10? Holy mackerel.
It's something we haven't thought of. Let's put it that way. I don't think Nathaniel Green Harrisoff would have thought about foiling monohulls. Just absorb that, a foiling monohull with arms going up and down and bicycle pedalers, and they couldn't conceive it. So maybe we can't conceive, but for sure the quest to go faster is going to generate faster boats.
40 knots upwind at a 42-degree tacking angle on a monohull.
Yeah. I know. And these boats are going astoundingly 4 times the speed of the wind. 4 times the speed of the wind. And a 12-meter, if you could go the speed of the wind, you're doing great.
You're holding out for dear life at a 12-meter if you're going the speed of the wind.
Exactly.
Gary Jobson, winner of the Cup himself, talker of the Cup for so many years. 9, you said 9 for 9 separate times?
Yes, sir.
Well, we thank you very much for everything you've done for the sport, and we thank you for being with us today. We really appreciate it.
Okay, Ken, thank you. I was honored to be asked, so thank you very much, and I'm sure we'll see you around the waterfront later this summer.
You got it. My thanks to Gary for sharing his memories from on the water and in the commentary booth. Next up is my conversation with a true pioneer of television, Jed Drake, who helped build ESPN from the ground up when the channel was just a crazy idea to broadcast sports 24 hours a day. ESPN ultimately changed how sailing was seen, especially in the United States. Well, I welcome the great Jed Drake to the North Sails podcast. And Jed, first of all, thanks for taking the time. We're talking to a bunch of the legends of television. I mean, television today and sailing has changed so dramatically, and it's so technically advanced. But I want to bring everybody back to yesteryear and the people who kind of make it all happen. And unfortunately, my friend, you are on that list. You are on that short list. So welcome to our podcast.
I don't know the last time I was called great, but it might have been by my dog. But thank you, Kenny. I appreciate that, and delighted to have a chat with you.
So ESPN, let's just cut right to the chase. ESPN was really that was the broadcast location of these early America's Cups Now, we talked to Gary Jobson earlier, and what I didn't realize is you guys actually produced, or I think you produced, the seventh race of the 1983 America's Cup, of which infamously Australia 2 beats Liberty to take the cup to Australia. Is that correct?
September 26th, 1983. What had happened was that the race 7 was scheduled for a Saturday, and it was to have been on Wide World of Sports, and there was not enough wind, so they moved it to Monday. And the only coverage of the event that was available was WJAR at Channel 10 in Providence, and they had a chopper up. But somebody really smart, it wasn't me at ESPN, said, hey, we're 3 or 4 years old at the time. We can televise the seventh race of the America's Cup. So they figured out a way to get the feed from WJR, put a couple of guys in the studio. I forget who it was. And we televised that race with WJAR's feed. I actually, that predated my involvement, other than to say I was at 1 Pelham East for that race, getting progressively lit during the afternoon until the seventh leg. And it got lit to the point that surrounded by a bunch of Aussies, we went down to the dock when Bondi finally pulled the boat out, and me and a bunch of my mates nearly got in a fist fight with the Aussies over it. But then again, 4 years later, I'm directing the damn thing. So it was an interesting turn.
I always claim that was my first year in Newport. I had just graduated from Boston University, the fine establishment of Boston University, of which I believe you were also a graduate.
That's true. A few years prior.
I think that was as close to Mardi Gras as Newport has ever come. It was insane that night, if I remember correctly.
We probably bumped into each other and didn't even know it. Yes, it was crazy.
So, Jed, ESPN, and this is going around the world. Give us a little rundown of what ESPN, the idea. What was ESPN to those who were kind of outside the United States and who may not know that history?
So ESPN was a fledgling, still 24-hour sports network, and even the concept of a 24-hour sports network in the United States was something that was still somewhat of a question mark. But what it allowed us to do was to go out and do events that others wouldn't, because we had all of this time to fill, and particularly in the middle of the night, it turns out. And so we got the rights to the America's Cup, but of course, the Cup is predated by endless amounts of round robins for the Louis Vuitton Cup, and we were down there in September prior to the actual event in February, and it was a long slog, and nobody really mentioned or thought about the Cup until we went live, Kenny, because we were just doing weekly highlight packages that we would edit in the middle of the night, But what happened was we did go live for the Challenger final. It was Dennis against the Kiwis. And suddenly when we went live, we became a thing, that this yacht race could be in the middle of Gage Roads off of Fremantle, where there's incredible images of these 12 meters banging through these waves, and we're on board. And all of a sudden it became like really fascinating. And so like in a blink, we became this thing. We even got a telegram. That's how far back we go. We got a telegram from David Letterman, like after the third Challenger race. And it said, hey, guys, this televised yacht racing could be a really big deal. Someday it might even be bigger than pro wrestling. My best, David Letterman. I still have a copy of it somewhere. So, we became like this thing. And then, Dennis defended the Cup in 4-0. And, it was all about the onboard cameras, Kenny. I mean, that's what changed everything. And I remember when we first arrived in Fremantle in September, and I looked at Kookaburra for the first time, and I saw these West cams, the big bulbs on their stern. And I'm like, oh my God, these guys actually have onboard cameras. We didn't have an onboard camera until just before the semifinals of the Louis Vuitton Cup. And it wasn't on Dennis's boat first. It was on Blackaller's boat because he was crazy enough to let us try it. And we put it on there, and it was like a moonshot. I remember being in the control room, and all of a sudden we lit it up, and it was like, oh my God, this is like the guy landing on the moon. We're actually on board, and I can hear Blackaller cursing and yelling and screaming with K-Art and the whole deal. It was fabulous.
So that was that's what turned into the Bud Camp.
That's right. Yeah, because we had to go out and sponsor it. Yeah, the Budweiser Yacht Camp. And you saw that damn graphic every time we went to the shot, just about. And guess who was
every time.
That was me.
I drank a lot of Budweiser at about two. It worked. You could tell Budweiser, they nailed it on their sponsorship, because while watching those races, I remember drinking a lot of Budweiser.
Supporting the sponsor. That's a good thing, Kenny.
First of all, did it ever dawn on, instead of producing and actually putting on air something at 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning in North America, did it ever dawn on you to tape it and to put it on during a time where people other than insane sailors might watch?
No, because that was the beauty of being ESPN. We were young enough, we were renegade enough, we were crazy enough to do things that nobody else would dare do. That's something that you would have done on Wide World of Sports. You would have taped it and 5 days later on. And again, this is obviously well before social media or even computers. And, you might have been able to kind of hold the results sort of, but, it didn't matter to us because we were like, hey, the race is live. We don't care. I mean, we got to fill 1 a.m. versus 1 p.m. Same thing. So let's go.
And what kind of other sports made the list, out of curiosity?
Well, I mean, first we started with, ironically, one of the biggest sports that we used to deal with tonnage was Australian rules football. I mean, we televised tons and tons of that because we could get the feeds of that. And most of the time we actually did that on tape because nobody knew the results anyway, so it didn't matter. We did a lot of Canadian football because we could get the rights to that. Hell, Kenny, the very first event that I ever produced was women's field hockey at UConn. And no disparaging women. I mean, it could have been men, but it was field hockey, and we would televise anything that moved. So doing the America's Cup was actually kind of a big deal, the oldest trophy.
I bet the 7 people watching that field hockey game really appreciated it, though.
Well, friends and family. Yes, of course.
As we move along, and we look at the technology involved with putting an America's Cup race on air today, in many ways was sailing and TV maybe even a little bit more of a likely marriage because of the technology, because of the advancement of technology? Is this something that was inevitable, or like the horse become in front of the cart, or the cart in front of the horse? Do you get
the event, the sport drove the technology very clearly, and that's a credit to the sport. I remember in 1987 we had the very first images of what became Sail Track, and it was just 2-dimensional. You could see the windward mark, you could see the reach legs and all that, but it wasn't. It was practical, it was useful versus nothing, but it wasn't where we wanted to be. And so in 92, for example, I worked with a really remarkable guy by the name of Alan Trimble, who you may have worked with along the way.
Absolutely.
With Silicon Graphics at the time. And he's working with Stan Honey, of course, and he'd figured out, your buddy Stan, and they figured out, how to track things and how to turn those into images. And next layer, I talked about, the onboard camera. And then I just wanted to do a 2-dimensional thing for 92. And AT said, no, we can do the full 3D thing here. This is 92. Think about the computer processing to generate live computer graphics of 2 boats that might be 3 miles apart. And suddenly, you're showing like distances and ley lines and all of this. And it was a necessity because we had so much coverage now live of the Cup in 92 because it was in San Diego. And so every day we're televising these events, and we needed something that would help make non-sailors understand it better. And that became one of the elements that we used to help drive it. So technology definitely drove it. And of course, like everything in television, as we proceeded forward down the calendar, if you will, the timeline, all of the technology became better and better. You went from fixed cameras to now you had robotics, and you had better, you had better gyro stabilization on the boats to be able to show these images. So there were all of those things that sort of drove it. But in the end, I always get back to the point that it is a sporting event, and that age-old line that Jim McKay wrote, God rest his soul, to start Wide World of Sports, is still as valid today as it was 40, 50 years ago. And it was certainly valid during the America's Cup. It's the thrill of competition of human drama. And all of these things that we did technologically were just to be able to tell the better story.
Technology today. What do you see when you see these boat races? I know you're watching them as an avid fan. What do you see? Is it something that has even blown you away, or what do you see?
Well, the current level where we are is sort of relatively similar to when Stan and AT won the for all of the stuff they're doing now that we see now that they developed, I think, for whenever Oracle was most involved, and Oracle put up all the money to bring the graphics up to speed. So there hasn't been a lot of technological advancement, but what I see, particularly with these foiling races, is a real necessity that they have delivered upon. And the technology is so vital to be able to tell these races, to be able to see what the playing field is, so to speak, to be able to see the projected tack lines and where the boats are going to cross, to be able to understand. I mean, just today, if I'm not mistaken, they added the wind shadows, and you could see now why Bertinelli was going. Spittle was going off onto the left, because it was pretty clear if the wind maps were accurate. It was like, no shit, Sherlock. Here's why I'm going left. And so all of that, here's the best thing about technology, and it's sort of it's an adjunct to the best directing. The best technology is that you don't recognize it when you see it. It's just part of the overall presentation, and it's so vital that you sort of you lose consciousness that you're seeing a boundary and you're seeing all these things. And I've always said to any of the people that have directed shows for me, the best directing is that directing which you never see. You just automatically in your mind know that the shot you're seeing is the best image at once. And before you can even consciously think of what you want to see next in the sequence, it's already there. And there's a few people like Drew Esikoff, who does Sunday Night Football, who's a dear friend, and he is the very best of it. He doesn't show off for the sake of showing off. He just puts you in the best shot at every single moment. And technology is sort of like that. It's almost benign, but yet it's incredibly powerful. And when those two things happen, you win.
What's the next step, do you think? Do you look? Do you have the laser vision to look into a TV set or a computer screen and say, I bet you this is what they're going to look at next?
There's always that differential and its semantics between evolution and revolution. And right now, honestly, I don't see the money involved in the America's Cup to drive a revolution. And that's why when I said that you saw what you're seeing in the graphics package right now is sort of a modest evolution from what Oracle essentially funded several cups ago.
No, that's right. I think that's correct. Yep.
So I don't think sailing's going to drive the revolution. I mean, I laugh. People have asked me about this for 20 years, and I said, I hope before I die that the presentation of sports is actually going to be completely hologram generated, and that you won't have a flat screen on your wall anymore. You're going to have couches surrounding a floor where you'll actually have the image of the game itself in holography. And you'll be able to sit there with, you can decide how big or whatever the players are, and you're going to see it in that way. That's a long way down the road, but it's a lot less further down the road than when I first thought of it about 20 years ago.
So we're all going to be sitting in our living room, essentially sitting in an AC 75, holding on for dear life with our kids throwing water glasses at us.
Something to that effect. Yeah.
I guess there's a couple, I guess you can call them ramifications of producing America's Cup broadcasts. And I'm going to take you to 1995 for a second, and how, that might have become a life changer in 1995, producing an America's Cup. Do you want to tell anybody this story of what happened in 1995 and why that cup will stand out in your life?
Oh, for me personally?
Yes.
Okay, I will. But can I share with you one story about 1992 that's really Susie said, you got to tell this one. It has nothing to do with her.
Okay, let's go.
Okay. So
we're not shy on stories here. You just bring whatever you want to bring, my friend.
Okay. So we are in the ESPN America's Cup compound with all the other world broadcasters, of which there were probably 3, TV and said, and a few others. And we had televised a race. And during that race on America Cubed in 92, there was an incident where one of the crewmen got a line wrapped around his leg, and he got pulled and he almost broke his ankle. And we were on the onboard camera to see all this, and we replayed it a bunch of times. So that happened. Fortunately, the guy didn't break his ankle. But flash forward, we finish up the race, we finish up our coverage for the day, and we fade to black. And remember, in 92, there was just total paranoia about spying. And it was led by Bill Koch and the recirculating scuba tanks and all that other bullshit. And so anyway, so we're in the truck. You know television trucks. So you got the 50, 60 monitors, and you got the big monitor in the front. It's called the program monitor, which is what actually goes out on the air. We had faded black. We had turned off the satellite. We're now packaging stuff for Sports Center off the air. But in packaging, we put stuff back on the program monitor so you can cue things and see them. The phone rings. And it's like, hey, can you roll that shot back about 7 seconds? And I said, who is this? And they said, there was a pause. He goes, it's America Cubed. We really need to see that shot. And I said, how the hell did you get our video feed? And he goes, trust us, we have it. They had figured out a way to tap into ESPN's production truck off the air, and were watching what we were doing. I swear to God. And I was like, I said to the director, Doug Holmes, I said, take black. I said, we'll do it on preview so they can't get it anymore. I was so pissed. Yeah, they were, I mean, when you talk about spying, it was like, oh my God, this shit's real. So that actually happened.
It was certainly real back then. That might've been the height of spying.
I think so. I mean, it was always good, a good drama, good paranoia for, otherwise boring race. And then you could talk about that for half an hour. No, but we did tell that story on the air because I said, you know what, this is news. These guys are seeing us in the truck when we're shut down. That doesn't happen. But anyway, so you want to talk about 95?
Yeah, 95. I just think some people might be interested in, some of the extracurriculars that might happen when you're a bigwig like you at ESPN. Where can that take you in life?
Unforeseen places. That is for sure, Kenny. So remember when I talked about technology and the fact that we had advanced from fixed cameras to robotics, right? So now we had multiple cameras on these boats, and there's a guy back in the television compound that's driving this camera, making the camera motions. So what would happen on the day when we would light up the cameras to test before the show is we would be lit up on the tow outs, and the different bow people would be seen. But what we quickly learned from America Cubed was that there was one person on the bow of that boat that actually liked to have a conversation with the camera. And so we had microphones, we had the camera, and this person would actually ask questions of Mr.
And
Camera.
this is, remember that we have to announce that this is the all women's America Cubed team.
That's quite true. Yes. 92 was the men's team. 95 was the women's team, save for one. And so Susie Leach is the self-named bow chick on American Cubed. And she starts talking to Mr. Camera. And it would be sort of benign questions. Are you having a good day? And he would tilt up and down to say yes. Or, then it would go like, did you have a rough night last night? No. But on other days, did you have a good night last night? Yes. Did you have a really good night? Yes. Did you? Yes. Excellent. So, and so now, meanwhile, we're seeing her image asking these questions of Mr. Camera because she's talking to the camera, and this is in the control room. I'm like, this girl is a whole lot of fun. What
a shocker that Susie would be just randomly talking to an inanimate object.
Yes,
it's absolutely. I know. Well, it's stunning.
As you know, you've come to know her firsthand from sailing with her. But I was like, wow, this woman is quite fascinating. And of course, she had previously worked for NASA after graduating from UVA with a degree in aeronautical engineering. So I think it was Stevie Lawrence, our edit producer, who named her the rocket scientist. And so she had that moniker throughout. She also got hit by the spinnaker pole more times than I can count, which is her excuse for when she doesn't have a memory, because she said she got hit about 6 times and knocked out.
Funny that happens.
Yeah. And she did live, actually. One time we had it live when she got knocked out completely. And I think she, just yesterday, because I told her I might mention this, she mentioned that I think Whidden luffed up on them a bunch of times. And that was one of the reasons why. So I don't know whether she's giving Tom credit or not for those. But anyway, so, flash forward 3 years later. I mean, we got to know each other a little bit at that cup, but, we all both went in our separate directions. And then Oh, but by the way, we did bring her on. This is a key part of this. We did bring her on to our production team after they lost the infamous race in the Defender Series to Dennis, the very last race when they were headed by like 4:18 at the top mark.
So for budding commentators, that means you have to be really good at talking to inanimate objects. Is that where you're going?
No, because she had a good ability to speak. She had a good ability to see things out on the race course. And initially, she was just going to help Gary out on the announce boat as a spotter and be sort of a second set of eyes for him. But as things ensued during the Cup with now Dennis racing against the Kiwis, who of course won 95, we had the great idea to put her on a headset and ask her a few questions. Of course, she didn't know what an IFB was, and for those uninitiated, that means that I can push a button in the truck and talk to her offline, but her mic is still open, and she didn't really understand the concept fully. So I was asking a question of Gary, like, where are we going next? Like, are they tacking? And she goes, I don't know. And that was on the air, of course. So, but she figured it out quickly, like she always does. And like 3 years later, we sort of came together. And we're now going to celebrate our 20th year of marriage next year. So there you go.
Funny how these things take you to interesting and fascinating and life-changing places.
Yeah, like right now she's over in Barcelona. She's on the American Magic VIP boat doing commentary for the VIPs out there on the race course. So, I guess it worked out okay as a commentator.
There you have it, ladies and gentlemen. Jed, great stories. I think this is stuff that I think nobody's ever heard before. This is fantastic. Everybody thinks it goes smooth. After a few more glasses of wine some night, I have a few more questions that we probably should ask on there. So we'll figure that out.
I look forward to that, Kenny.
Jed Drake, one of the legends in sports television. Thank you very much for being with us today.
My pleasure.
Jed certainly knows his stuff, and I'm looking forward to sharing a drink with him soon to continue to reminisce about the old days. Finally, it was a real pleasure to speak with the true legend of the Cup, a broadcaster who has made the America's Cup Hall of Fame just because of his voice alone. Here's my conversation with Peter Montgomery. So how many Cups total have you been a part of?
13, 1-3. Yep.
We talked to Gary Jobson yesterday. I think he was only 12, if I remember correctly. So you got him nipped by one.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, it depends with Gary. He was with Ted Turner in '77. I wasn't there, and then he and Blackall got snicked and didn't make the defence in '80. But that was the first one I saw. Freedom and Australia, not Australia 2. That was 3 years later, and then. How broadcasting was so different then to where it's got to now, the whole evolution of it all.
So were you a sailor growing up, or did you learn this sport because you have such a great voice?
No. I'd been sailing a lot with a group of guys I grew up in Dunedin in the bottom of New Zealand. And in those days, I was probably more interested in other sports, including rugby. But I had sailed a bit, but it was a bit chilly in Dunedin. But once I got to Auckland, I sailed a lot. And it's a very long story, but a fellow I went to school with in Dunedin opened the door to me into broadcasting. And the first event I ever broadcast was the World OK Dinghies in 1970.
Oh, my goodness.
After that, I was then invited to do the 1 Ton Cup. And so as New Zealand sailing moved along with getting into the Admiral's Cup, and then, of course, the round the world races. And one thing led to another, and it's a very long story, but in spite of what I thought in 1980 and seeing, I know the reaction in 1983 was, well, if Australia can do it, then so can New Zealand, that classic rivalry, that Anzac Australia-New Zealand rivalry.
Yeah.
And long story, it all happened out of that, and enter Michael Fay, who accused me of him spending far too much money, because I was one of 3 people that managed to persuade Michael he should become involved. The other 2 were Ron Holland and Alan Sefton.
So do you find, from the commentating standpoint, do you find it easier to do it on the water or in my experience, I've never been on the water. I've only been sitting in a box with a bunch of screens in front of me. Which would you prefer? Which seemed more natural to you?
The best was on the water on North Star with your good friend Terry Kohler and Mary Kohler. And there we were, America's Cup 2000. And the only vessel in front of us were the umpires and the trailing boat. So we could, and I did often, just do play-by-play commentary on what we could see. But we also had a monitor in front of us on what was going to air as well. And I was also doing some radio updates. And a person I used regularly for an expert analyst was Tom Whitten, and he was quite good. And
you got to find a better analyst than that.
Well, Tom was just absolutely. But in those, we had Chris Law, but in 2003 we had Ed Beard, who was good, very good. And during this time, of course, I remember back in 1983, I was trying to commentate, and there all there was just the blimp, if you remember, nothing.
Sure.
No graphics and a blimp. And when on that second last leg of the race, when Australia 2 jibed away, it was hard. It was hard to get a perspective because you only had the blimp. You didn't have all these camera shots you've got in this day and age. And so anyway, we got there and there was Australia 2 leading around the bottom mark, and you could easily follow then the tacking duel to the finish.
Yes.
And what was that? The 26th of December 1983, and the America's Cup changed forever.
I've sat in the booth with 3 expert broadcasters like yourself. Lord knows I don't put myself into that category, but they've all been prepared at the end of the final race with their line, with their shtick. And I think it's fair when you think of your career, at least I think of your career, I think of, and the America's Cup is now New Zealand's Cup. And you can say it a heck of a lot better than me, of course. Was that, and I've always wondered, is that something that just rolled off your tongue, or was that prepared? And by the way, I'll preface it by saying the other 3 times I've sat in the booth with experts, they have all been completely scripted and prepared. They've actually read a very emotional comment at the end of the race, but they've actually been that prepared. How about you? What did Peter Montgomery do when he knew?
In 1995, it was off the top of my head. Back in 1992, I was invited to be the Antipodean commentator in the movie called Wind. And so about 10 times I flew from San Diego, helped me with the airport just north Oakland of San Francisco to work on that movie. And there was a lot of scripting then, and things just went into the ether and topped up. So part of that I remembered, and I do remember waking up that morning, what was it, the 14th of May, 1995.
The fact that you can remember these dates.
The 13th of May, Saturday in San Diego, 14th in New Zealand.
Okay.
And I thought this would be a big day for New Zealand. So what I wanted to really try and summarize before getting to the Sharpie and was that I'd been there in Newport, Rhode Island, and I thought New Zealand would get a man on the moon quicker than challenging for the cup, because we just didn't have the resources, financial, technical, and even the sailors with the skill. That was part one. But then, and also then summarizing what the New Zealand Challengers had done in Fremantle. Forget about the big boat. I just skipped over that. But at 92 and then coming into 95, because there was some really good challenges. And if you remember, Kenny, what won Australia? Hell, I was there. I was within 50 meters of that boat sinking, and when it went down so fast. And ironically, I remember as much about that dreadful incident as I do about crossing over the line. So building up, I tried to do a quick summary of the influence of sailing. That's how people got to New Zealand way back in the 19th century, 18th century, and then building up to it. and it just sort of all came out as the most illustrious, the most elusive prize in sailing. America leaves the United States for the second time, and then the America's Cup is now New Zealand's Cup. But then after that, because I'd set that precedent in the America's Cup, well, I can't remember what I said, remains or is still New Zealand's Cup.
Yep.
And I had a variation on the theme in Bermuda 2017 is the America's Cup is New Zealand's Cup again. And then whatever I said in 2021. So, but it was all, and yes, those other three, I had just written down the notes so I would get it at the time. But the first one, my head, but there was quite a lot of the influence, I think, of being involved in Wind and going up and talking with the script writers, and because Carol Ballard, who had won a whole bunch of Emmys, he was the director, and so and just working with those guys, with Matthew Modine, who was giving me acting lessons, for goodness sake, at Berkeley Circle, Berkeley, whatever it was, Square, and so all of that added up, and also all good broadcasters. I've often thought, and probably as much from my radio background before doing TV, I've always thought, well, have a plan B as an escape route if something doesn't go right, or you've got to fill or whatever. And so I've had those things up in my mind as well.
Let's fast forward, Peter, to today. What do you think of this America's Cup? What, from a fan standpoint and from a television commentating standpoint, what do you think about what we're seeing today?
I'm impressed by the boats flashing by, and the last cup just right out in front of our place. We would see them going by, Flat Stick and New York Yacht Club were the people who are out on the water most. All the challenges, and yes, they were spectacular. Okay, they were multi-hulls. Now we're on a monohull, and the foiling is spectacular. But what I miss, without living in the past, is real people. You've got the people driving the boat; they're not animated enough. They could be driving a car, and then behind that, as best you can see, the tacticians. And they're not really involved, and you just don't see the cycle. Okay, there might be the occasional shot looking up, but
of some poor guy killing himself.
Yeah, killing a cycle. So all of that I miss. But in contrast to even '95, when ARL came on, I think back as '92 Cup, and the graphics we had then were good, but nothing like now. I mean, the graphics are. I remember back in Fremantle and the Australian television, they were quite advanced because they used car racing cameras or cameras they use in motor racing up by the mast on Kookaburra. And it gave an idea, but it's nothing like now. And the way they did their GPS, they used surveyors' theodolites, for goodness sake, so they could try to get an idea. So there's no doubt that the graphics we see now are just absolutely outstanding and light years ahead. But and yes, these boats are spectacular, but I just it's just missing the human element to me a bit, really. And the other thing I do miss really is the colourful people, not just Buddy Melgers or Tom Blackholder or Dennis Conner, but other people in the media conferences. They hadn't been to media prevention offices, telling them what not to say and how to keep. I mean, these were real people telling it as it was, and it was great television.
So 23-minute race, which is what they spec out now, which is kind of made for television, versus your hour-and-a-half race, or even let's preface this by saying the starting line, you got 10 minutes to the port lay line versus 45 seconds to the port lay line. What does Peter Montgomery prefer?
I would prefer it longer, maybe not 90 minutes. I think actually, Kenny, some even went close to well over 2 hours some days. To me, they're just too quick. And I've said to Russell Coots, his face as well, with Sail GP, it's just too slam bam, thank you, ma'am. And I actually think sailors' concentration is longer than 23 minutes. And to me, one of the great things I do miss is the dial-up and the maritime play and the intellectual gymnastics. Not only this, because the helmsman or skipper, or if it's the same person, they're only as good as the people, not only in the afterguard, but also the trimmers. And, you know, the whole combination of the teamwork to be able to finally get in the windward position away from the start mark, really, it takes a hell of a lot of doing. Now, okay, I know that there's some of the windward stuff with the positions we've got here, and it may not be necessarily the guy in the windward helm who's actually steering the boat. It could be someone on the leeward helm, whether it's Nathan Outridge, etc. But I love the dial-up. And then definitely for the next, as they lined up, the next 5-10 minutes, who's lifting higher, who's footing faster, whatever. And I remember, you know, trying to describe it as in 95, Team New Zealand's hit the elevator as they just absolutely lifted off. So I 90 minutes, maybe a bit long, but I think from 45 to 60 minutes, but all the rest I know is made for television. And I think the history of the Cup a little bit's been lost.
You were in '95. You were obviously quite close to the Kiwi side of the team for all obvious reasons. We talked to Simon Dobney the other day, and one of the questions I asked him was, "Did you know what you had? Like, did you know how fast your boat was in '95? From your perspective, entering the finals, from kind of a Kiwi fan and obviously a Kiwi expert perspective, did you know that the Kiwi boat was as good as it was in 1995?
Yes, and there are some people in the afterguard of NZL 32 who made an art form out of putting people off. Yeah. Remember, initially, Peter Blake told the designers, principally Laurie Davidson and Doug Peterson, and the other good people in the design team, design a boat as though it's a one-off, because we may not have enough funds for a second one. Mm-hmm. So give it your best shot. And that was NZL 32 that proved to be the quickest. But They did a variation on the theme with NZL 38. And it won round robin 1, 2, 3. And by the way, Kenny, round robin 1 started late January 95, and the Cup itself was on the 13th of May, the last race, 95. I mean, now this stuff's all over in 6 weeks, where you would well know because you've been part of it. It went on for 3-4 months. Kids school in Coronado and Point Loma, we lived there for 8 months. So, you know, it was a completely different deal. Anyway, getting back to your point that when they started racing 38, and then they went back to 32. A lot of people thought, oh, well, 38 second boat would be the fastest, when Team New Zealand knew that it was quicker. And they were doing this decoy, oh, well, no, it's not faster. But they knew they had a quick boat, and they did their best to put people off the track. But I had good sources within the camp, some of you who know, you would know, and they kept telling me what was happening, but I wasn't to, closed mouth catches no flies.
So I bet you I could guess. I won't do it on there. I bet you I could guess who some of those sources may have done. All right, let me take one more quick step backwards before we wrap this thing up. What's it like in New Zealand? What's the atmosphere around the America's Cup like in New Zealand right now? I know for sure there was, I don't know if anger is the right word, but a little bit of angst about the cup in the event itself being moved out of Auckland, which, by the way, even though it was COVID, I loved being there for the last cup. What's the attitude? What do you think? What is it like in the press? What's it like on the streets in New Zealand at this stage?
Both TV channels, there's been some very good reports, particularly from a woman called Lisette Rayner on TV3, and Todd Niles doing some very good updates for the Stuff newspaper network. Mm-hmm. which has the big papers in Wellington and Christchurch, and also in the Hamilton and the Waikato. There's been some pretty good updates on all of the media generally, and the radio bulletins in the morning are leading, certainly in the first or 2-3 items, the latest update on what's happening. Yes, there are some people who are saying, well, it shouldn't be there or whatever. They've got other agendas, but the end result is that really so much it goes back to COVID, because there were well over 120 super yachts registered to go to Auckland in 21, and in the end they got 12. And so financially, COVID really damaged the whole New Zealand thing, and there were a lot of other factors involving government or government departments, and so that's why Team New Zealand have gone there. And sure, a lot of people are disappointed because COVID was it stuffed it really, and that has had an effect. Without COVID, it would be in Auckland now, but it's not. It's got to move on.
Peter Montgomery, I still have chills. I still have goosebumps hearing you make that call, that infamous call of American Cup is now New Zealand Cup. Thank you so much for spending time with us. It's just a pleasure and an honor to always sit down with you. The word legend is, I think, used too much, but in your case, we're going to give you that moniker. How's that?
Thank you. It's been an absolute delight. Nice to catch up and see you again. And so at times like this, I wish I was in Barcelona.
It's not too late. They have plane flights anytime.
Yeah. Great, Kenny. All the best.
Wasn't it special to share stories and memories with these wonderful characters and close friends from the world of television? They're the ones who helped elevate our sport and take it to new heights, pushing the boundaries in their own ways in terms of technology and impact, both on and off the water. These legends of the microphone are an integral part of the Cup. I hope you enjoyed hearing from them as much as I enjoyed speaking to them. As we move forward from the past to the future, our next episode will be focused on the Youth and Women's America's Cup, one of the latest innovations here in Barcelona being sailed in the AC40s. Be sure to tune in for the next one as we delve deeper into the wonderful event and inch closer to the final showdown. Stand by for that. But in the meantime, sail fast and talk again soon.